Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We are in Parashat Vayakhel this morning, and it is read this year with Parashat's Pikudei. They are read together. It is only when we have a leap month that they are separated. Remember, because we add 4 Shabbatot to the year, so then we need 4 separate parshiot for those Shabbatot. So we read this together this year, and that means we begin at chapter 35, verse 1. You have page numbers behind me, thanks to our religious practices chair, Bert, and so we'll begin at 35:1.
Moses then convoked the whole Israelite community and said to them, "These are the things that the Lord has commanded you to do. On 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th day you shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on the Sabbath day." Do you want to go on?
Yeah.
Moses said further to the whole community of Israelites, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take from among you gifts to the Lord. Everyone whose heart so moves him shall bring them. Gifts for the Lord, gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen and goat's hair, tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil, and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli, and other stones for setting, for the ephod and the breastpiece. And let all among you who are skilled come and make all that the Lord has commanded. The tabernacle, its tent and its covering, its clasp and its planks, its bars, its posts and its sockets, the ark and its poles, the cover and the curtain for the screen, the table and its poles and all its utensils, and the bread of display, the lampstand for lighting, its furnishings and its lamps, and the oil for lighting, the altar for incense and its poles, the anointing oil and the aromatic incense, and the entrance screen for the entrance of the tabernacle, the altar of burnt offering, its copper grating, its poles and all its furnishings, the laver and its stand, the hangings of the enclosure, its posts and its sockets, and the screen for the gate of the court, the pegs for the tabernacle, the pegs for the enclosure and the cords, the service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary, the sacral vestments of Aaron the priest, and the vestments of his sons for priestly service."
All right. We are getting as we remind ourselves each year, a very detailed list of exactly what is going to be required. Let's put ourselves in space and time as we begin this Torah portion. Vayakhel Moshe et kol adat b'nei Israel. So Moshe congregates the congregation. What has just happened before that?
The golden calf.
The golden calf. What happens after the golden calf? The tablets. So he's already smashed them. Calf. So he goes up. He gets the second set of tablets. According to tradition, what day is that he comes down with that second set and gives it to the people? Traditionally, that is Yom Kippur. So he comes back with the second set. The covenant between God and the people Israel is renewed after a pretty ugly incident of betrayal and apostasy. And so the renewal of the covenant happens here. He brings down the tablets at the end of last week, and he comes right to the people. He comes down with the tablets. His face, right, is glowing. He's radiant. He has to veil his face. And we're told that God speaks with Moshe now intimately from between the Kruvim on the Aron, on the ark. And now Moshe's dealing with the people for the first time. So what's the first thing they're commanded after the whole messiness of the golden calf? This is the first time Moshe's speaking to them. Shabbat. Why is that? That's the first thing. They've had this huge fight, God and Israel. God moved out for a while. And now it's their first conversation after that. And the first thing is 6 days you may work, and on the 7th it shall be a Shabbat of complete rest.
That's how important it is.
The punishment is death.
And also to calm you down.
Right.
It's a way that we all find, if you observe it, it calms you down.
So calming down, tie that for me to why this is the first thing said after this huge breach.
They're fight, and they're all angry.
And it brings you back
So what I hear you saying is that Shabbat is possibly a way to prevent another episode, right? That if we take that day to not only calm down, but to be in relationship to the holy, it might prevent another such episode. Mary?
It also divides the time between the working out of all kinds of negative things and a new time to begin again.
So we have to do a lot of stuff to fix this relationship, and we'll do a lot of that tinkering and all of that for 6 days, and then we need an opportunity to stop and say, okay, that's over. And now we begin anew with Shabbat.
It sounds like another creation story.
Another creation story. Lovely. Creation. Shabbat is in memory of Bereshit, right? Zecher l'ma'aseh Bereshit. A reminder of the doings of creation. So now maybe we're getting a whole new creation. Because it was all possibly obliterated, right?
Also, they just had the golden calf. And Shabbat, this is about the holiness in time, not in things.
So lest y'all get so caught up in the business of things, I'm going to make sure that you stay in relationship to time as being like the organizing factor.
Well, maybe if you say it's the creation thing, maybe it goes back to the God of vengeance, because it says you shall have a Sabbath, and whoever does work shall be put to death.
It is not the God of vengeance.
Why would you say
It's capital punishment. If one of the most important things is living on this time, and Shabbat is off limits for any kind of work, and that is the order of the king, anyone who defies publicly the order of the king, and therefore the rule of the king, is put to death. It's treason.
ultimate punishment?
It's treason.
Okay.
So we forget, because we separate church and state, and we are very, very American this way. I just had an interesting conversation in the I Engage series. The last session, I was very humbled, because I try to be self-aware about being ethnocentric. We are all ethnocentric. All of us think from our cultural perspective. I try to be very self-aware about that, having studied anthropology, right, for my undergraduate degree, and cultural anthropology. I'm shocked sometimes when I go, oh, I am truly American. And it was in this I Engage thing talking about the separation of church and state, and talking about if Israel, and this was me, I was like, if they could just figure that out, like we did that like over 200 years ago, like if they could get it together and figure that out, there wouldn't be so many flippin' problems over there, right? And this panel of very progressive thinkers was saying, absolutely not. Why should there be separation of religion and politics in the Jewish state? What would that even mean? To say that our Jewish values don't dictate what we think should be happening in the Knesset? Of course it should, right? Everything we talk about here should be influencing how we make decisions about what should be happening in our court system, or who we should elect as a representative official, or what matter we should vote up or vote down. Why wouldn't we have our religion inform those choices? And it was like, oh, right. So, right, like, so the haughty American, like, who's like, and so I guess my point is, when we're studying these texts, we have to go there. We have to remember there was zero separation. The king was God. There is no king in these stories. They get one later because they want one. But there's no king. There's a prophet. Moshe doesn't have any power. Zero. Moshe speaks for the king. So for them, God is king. Going against God's rulings is treason. Not every act of going against God's orders is treason, but the ones that are treason are punished the same way we still punish traitors. Why? Why is it capital punishment that we use for treason?
Destroys the culture. Treason is destructive of the entire culture.
So treason is considered so dangerous that it can influence other people in the society to a point that is so dangerous and so threatening that we must have or I'm not saying we must, I'm saying our thinking has been, because we have it in place, that the punishment therefore must be the ultimate. That's how dangerous it is. So rather than ask, why is this such a vengeful God who would punish them for Shabbat, we reverse the question. Why is Shabbat so important that breaking it was treasonous? Right? That's the question to ask. And that's kind of what we've been exploring. But what we learn is, if we see, and anyone who violates it shall be put to death, okay, it's treason. Why? What is so dangerous about breaking Shabbat publicly that it would need to be capital punishment, right? And that's where we have to do the work of trying to figure that out, because it's not going to tell us. Yes?
Well, part of it was, it's always a new moment to begin. Every Shabbat is your new chance to start.
But all that sounds lovely. That's lovely. Why are you killed for it? Right?
Because if you don't do it, you're just going to go down the whole...
Okay.
If you don't do that, you have violence, you have all the bad things that were happening.
Okay. So then an Israelite worldview would say, this business of stopping and taking a break and all of that is not just loveliness. It's not just a good idea. It is salvific for the entire society.
It is what?
Salvific, yes.
Like salvation?
Yes. So it is, right? It is salvific. It is not just a nice idea. It is so dangerous if it starts to spread that we don't do this. It is seen as, understood as so dangerous. Capital punishment has to be the punishment for breaking it.
Is that the motive of the Hasidim and the Orthodox in Israel who throw stones at people?
Yes. For them, Shabbat is foundational.
But they can be in charge of the murdering themselves if...
Sure.
Personally.
Yeah. Most fanatics are. Most fanatics feel very comfortable taking the religion into their own hands to say, we will decide what's the ultimate. Absolutely.
This is not just a Jewish issue. It exists in the Muslim world. The question of what is the relationship of Sharia, which is their traditional law, to what the laws of the state are. And I would say it exists in our country with respect to Christians.
Yes.
And with respect to our Supreme Court.
Yes.
Well, now it's 8 justices, have 5 people of the Catholic faith.
Still to be tested.
And to what extent they or people in Congress have to be governed by their religious faith and religious
I just watched the documentary Political Animals about the 4 lesbian Congress people in California. It was great. And I was amazed watching the testimony of people who were voting against the bill to protect gay and lesbian students in schools. They stood up and they said time after time after time after time, my religion, my Bible and my God tell me that I must vote against this bill, and I ask you to do the same. Over and over and over. And I thought, wow, so here is a clear statement by elected officials that they are voting on this issue based on religious ideology.
But isn't it important to put this in a historical context?
Well, you tell me, is it? And if so, tell me why.
Well, I think it's absolutely important.
Okay, so tell me.
Historical context. This is for everything that's important from here, and if one even believes this is the word for word the word of God, this is 3,000 years old.
Right.
And I think that in this, even hundreds of years later, when Islam took this on and went with capital punishment, I think that we can talk about how important Shabbat is and how important Shabbat was then. But the fact of the matter was that, like you said, it was the king's word. Mm-hmm. Somebody just got killed, because they crossed Vladimir Putin. So these days are not over. But I mean, for us today, we need to look at you as a constructionist, or you it is a living document, to quote the Supreme Court. And frankly, of the It's a Living document.
All of us in this room are. Everyone in this room is.
Did this ever happen? Was anybody
We don't
in
know.
Jewish history ever killed
We don't know.
because they desecrated Shabbat?
We absolutely do not know.
But it's not something that happened all the time.
I can't imagine
This is
that it
one of
was.
This is one of those lines that people never quote. People pull lines out of context in Torah and the Bible and say, well, it says you shouldn't blah blah, but they pull this one out.
They pulled this out when they want to show the vengeful, angry, which is why I got so defensive of it, the vengeful, angry God of the Old Testament. When it is supersessionist, people who are looking at this, they do pull this and other lines like this out, saying Jesus came and changed all of this. Now it's the gospel of love, not the vengeful, angry, hateful, jealous God of the Old Testament. So that's one of the reasons.
Genesis.
Huh?
They do the same thing with the Quran. Pull things out like that to
Right.
support.
So I just want to. So I always want to be clear, so that when we hear that somewhere else, we can say stop. It was considered treason. This is not about God. This is about the people's understanding of what laws were so important that they were considered treasonous. If it's the word of the king, you are committing a crime against the state of the highest order if you break. And so I just want us to be able to walk out of here and articulate that whenever we hear, right? Because even you went there. Because even we go there if we're not educated about their context. It was 3,000 years ago, yes, and so we need to understand what that meant. 3,000 years ago, ancient Near East, what does that mean? Mary?
Well, I'm going back to what you said in terms of your consciousness raising in this other group when they said, well, shouldn't we incorporate, these laws in our political state? And we're living at a time, where this is a country of Christian majority, and where the values, as you said, all these people who said it's against my religion, and yet we do not see the incorporation of any religious fundamental principles like welcoming the stranger at this time in our lives. I mean, the level of hypocrisy between religious values and practice is just, it's mind-boggling every day.
No.
So that's just what that touch point did for me.
Mm-hmm.
We're not living it.
Political Animals. It should be coming out on Netflix or something. It was very, very well done. It was very good.
There's a commentary in this book that quotes one commentator that it doesn't identify as saying that the death here is the death of the second soul.
The Neshama Yetera that we get on Shabbat.
Right. That on Shabbat people have we're supposed to have a second soul, and that when you violate Shabbat, basically what you're doing is you're killing.
Bet me it's Hirsch. Bet me money it's Hirsch. All right, because that's very Hirschian.
There's another distinction, I think, of Jewish law particularly being that of responsibility. And we're responsible to observe things because it's for the greater good of the culture and of the Jewish world. American law and British common law are more right-oriented. Your rights, not your responsibilities. And that makes a distinct difference in how you approach religion. If it's your rights, I have a right to say you can't have an abortion or you can't take birth control or whatever else. But in Judaism, it's what your responsibility is to the greater good.
It's both, right? It's both in Judaism.
There are rights too, but its principle, I think, is responsibility.
And again, I'll say I feel like it's both. And if we had a balanced approach, things would look very different, right? But in
Jewish state, you're not put to death for not observing.
No, but you're
God
stoned.
forbid. God forbid.
Yeah.
But not by the government.
Right.
And to be clear to your earlier example, murder is not okay. It's not accepted, and it would be punished the same way as anything else. I don't care who does it. If it's a religious fanatic who does it, it's murder. It's not considered in any way forgivable at all.
So
it's murder.
How do they get to that point that murder is murder, even if you're?
Because it's the civil courts. The civil court in Israel decides what the guidelines are for murder.
So
they don't look at Torah.
Is there a separate court for the religious court and
yes.
and the civil
yes,
court?
100%. 100%. Yes. Yeah. The Knesset is civil law. So if somebody is stoned by the ultra-Orthodox, they go to the civil court
I see.
to sue for whatever, damages or to shut them down or whatever. It's not a religious court. Now, you could choose to go to the religious court and fight in the religious court, but not if you're a woman because you can't testify.
Right.
Even if it's you that it happened to. You can't, you have no standing. You have to tell it to a man who then tells them. So, yeah. All right. We're moving on. Vayakhel Moshe kol adat bnei Yisrael. I'm not moving on. I just want to go back to, there's many commentaries that suggest why, so obviously the people have to be together for Moshe to address them, to tell them what's happening. But for the spiritual commentators, of course, every word of Torah is important. There's meaning in every single word. And it says Vayakhel because that is what was required before the people could get the instruction to build the Mishkan, which was to seal the deal, right? God moved out. Now God says, okay, build me an apartment, right? That I can live with you. And I'm going to come back. Right? So they're about to get the layout, the blueprint for the apartment. But before that can happen, says all of our commentators, Vayakhel Moshe et kol adat bnei Yisrael. Moshe had to make of the people a kahal, a congregation. We are Kehilat Yisrael. This is the verb. He congregated them. Right? So don't think just convoked. Right? Use that verb more existentially. He did stuff to make them become a kahal. And it was only then that God could give them the instructions. Right? We can't achieve building a place for God to dwell unless we are a kahal. Unless we come together as a kehilah, as a congregation, which I find super powerful, right? It's obviously, look at my job. So that's our job, right? Is to figure out how we Vayakhel. How do we do that? How do we constantly, consistently, every day make sure we are kehila'ing? Right? And that's the work of Kehilat Israel. Right? We have to be kehila'ing all the time.
By doing exactly what we're doing now.
By doing what we're doing now. That is certainly one of my favorite answers. We should get together and study a little Torah. All right. So then we get all these details starting at verse 5 all the way through, as Bert read so eloquently, through verse 19. Because kehila'ing is all about the details. We don't love it. But it's all about who's ordering the carpet, right? And have we checked with how many vendors and who gets a say in what color the carpet is? And do we really need to replace it? We have other things we need to be spending that money on, like that leak in the wall in the ECC. And by the way, who's checked on that recently? Is there any mold? So it's not attractive. The list Bert read did not have us riveted. We're like, get to the, okay, read, get to the good part. Get to the action, right? But really, the work of being a kehilah is the details. It's in here's what we need, and here's how much, and here's why, because we're going to have to make poles, and then thingies, the sockets, and then the rings, and then the things that connect the right? It's all about the connectors.
People ask me why you have to pay to join a synagogue. It kind of connects in, and I try to say, because there's a building, and there's people, and there's things, and there's security, and maybe you don't have that at your church or, whatever. And so it sounds like it's kind of that same thing. It's all the pieces have to come together.
It's all the thingies.
Like they are here, all the thingies that nobody sees. If you come to a service, they're not in front of you. The carpet's there. There's nobody here. But that's the whole.
That's right, and we all participate, right? It says the whole community of Israel. We're going to look at a teaching maybe if we get there before tomorrow afternoon. That says, notice how many times it says all the people, convoked all the people, says to the whole community of Israel, right? And then verse 20 that we're going to get to in a second. So the whole community of Israel left Moshe's presence over and over and over again. It's the whole community, everybody, all, kol, the whole, everybody. Why? Because everyone has to pay dues. Because if you don't, according to your ability, if you don't, is it really yours? Because for us, we believe it is the people's synagogue. This isn't my synagogue. This isn't the board's synagogue. This is your synagogue. And we have always had a very high value, starting here, that it's everybody who participates in making it happen to whatever level they can, right?
Kind of the skin in the game argument.
That's exactly right. You have to have dolphin skin in the game.
Maybe it was off the topic, but not really.
All right, come on. It wasn't that bad.
Can I ask a question about verse 2?
Yeah.
It says that on 6 days work may be done in general. The Ten Commandments say your work. On 6 days a week you shall do your work.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a difference without a distinction, or a distinction without a difference?
I mean, if there is, I don't know what it is, but
because I've always been struck the idea that people do have work that they have to do.
Sheshet yamim ta'aseh melacha. For 6 days will you do work. So I don't know if there's a big difference between work and your work.
Go on.
Okay. All right, so verse 20.
So the whole community of the Israelites left Moses' presence, and everyone who excelled in ability and everyone whose spirit moved him came, bringing to the Lord his offering for the work of the tent of meeting, and for all its service, and for the sacral vestments. Men and women, all whose hearts moved them, all who would make an elevation offering of gold to the Lord, came bringing brooches, earrings, rings, and pendants, gold objects of all kinds. And everyone who had in his possession blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, and dolphin skins brought them. Everyone who would make gifts of silver or copper brought them as gifts for the Lord, and everyone who had in his possession acacia wood for any work of the service brought that. And all the skilled women spun with their own hands and brought what they had spun in blue, purple, and crimson yarns and in fine linen. And all the women who excelled in that skill spun the goat's hair. And the chieftains brought lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece, and spices and oil for lighting, for the anointing oil and for the aromatic incense. Thus the Israelites, all the men and women whose hearts moved them to bring anything for the work that the Lord through Moses had commanded to be done, brought it as a free will offering to the Lord.
All right, so throughout that whole paragraph, what's the thing we hear over and over and over?
Everybody.
All men and women.
All those who are, right? And we looked at this language a few weeks ago, right? That has that in their spirit or in their heart, right? Who are, ruach chochmah, right? Who are talented in that, and whose hearts move them. So all again, and whose hearts move them. This is not forced labor. Why is that important?
Because they came of their own.
Why is that important?
It's
Why is
ownership.
it? It's right. It's ownership of the whole.
More. Give me more. More. Why is it important? They used to be slaves. They were just slaves.
So it's choice.
This could feel really similar, right? You will sit. If you know how to spin, you're going to be spinning for 12 hours a day, right? It can feel very much like, what's the difference between this and Egypt? We're brought out of Egypt to go to another building project? Thank you. We had one of those. Right? We didn't love it. Right? It is super important that every verse about this work says, Kol Nadiv Leiv, everyone whose heart is willing, who's voluntary. Nadiv is voluntary gift, right? Offered. There's a lot of kids named Nadiv in Israel, right? So, Nadiv Leiv, that your heart is moved to do it, we might say in English, right? And that is critical about the Mishkan. People brought their stuff. No one went through their houses and said, "Oh, I know I saw some lapis in here." Right? They brought, it was their own offering that they brought and their own skill that they offered. And it was all because their hearts moved them. That is critical. Free will offering. That was critical, that the work of the Mishkan is not slave labor. Everyone has to participate in terms of the half shekel, the tax. Everyone had to give half a shekel. But beyond that, it's all voluntary.
It's an advertisement for volunteering for temple.
Yes, 100%. So just think about that.
And this translates in the modern sense that prayer, which is a substitute many, many times over for this, has to be of the heart. that it's not just going through the motions, that it's not because you have to
now
do
you're
it.
starting a whole nother conversation, because there are plenty of commentators who would say, as long as each word comes out of your mouth so that your ear can hear it, you are yotze.
Right.
You
And
have done your duty.
Understood, but there are others,
Correct.
including
Always.
Hasids, who
Some.
who would say that it is service of the heart, and if your heart's not in it, that it's not complete.
Correct.
This sort of reminds me of our old synagogue building that was right on this spot. A good portion of it was built by the hands of the congregation.
Right.
And I think that was part of the reason why they did it, but I mean, obviously there are other reasons, but it was the love of the people who were forming this congregation that built it.
To participate in actually building it.
And the passion that you feel when you work together and see something rise and reflect your labor, and that you can live in it and do wonderful things in it is, I mean, the psychology behind it is just...
It's solid. Even though it's 3,000 years ago, it is solid. Because we don't change all that much, do we? Right? So that was one of the first questions people ask. Why does God need a home if God is everywhere? Because God knows that we need a communal building project. God knows that we like to participate together in something and watch it rise, and then be the central way, place, means by which we connect to that which is greater. So God, our character God, figured that out. All right, so I want to look at verse 30. And Moses said to the Israelites, "See, Adonai is singled out by name, Bitzalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. God has endowed him with the divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft, and has inspired him to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting and to carve wood, to work in every kind of designer's craft, and to give directions." So he's going to be the chief architect of this whole business. He and Aholiab, son of Achisamach, of the tribe of Dan, have been endowed with the skill to do any work of the carver, the designer, embroiderer in blue and purple crimson yards, fine linen, and the weaver, blah, 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 blah. Let then Bitzalel and Aholiab and all the skilled persons whom God has endowed with skill and ability to perform, let them carry it out. So Moses calls to Bitzalel and Aholiab and every skilled person that God's endowed with the skill, everyone excelled in ability, and they took from Moshe all the gifts, right? So now they're going to go do it. And what does Moshe say in verse 5?
The people are bringing more than is needed.
The artisan said to Moshe, the people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks. And Moshe says, let no man or woman make further effort towards gifts for the sanctuary. Stop. It's too much.
We tried to do that here.
The first and last time in Jewish history, right, that leadership said, stop. You're bringing too much.
We had to do that here.
With not
things,
recently,
not with
but
money.
not on my watch.
Not with money, but with things.
What happened to the gold from the golden calf?
It got melted down into ash and then put into water, and the people had to drink it. Wow. Really? It's so funny what parts of the story we remember and which parts we forget. Right? Do we remember how the Purim story ends? Right? So, with the massacre. So they drank it. That was their punishment. Yeah. Yep. So you want that calf? No problem. You got it. You got it. Right? It's kind of like the quail. You start whining about meat, no problem. You're going to eat it until it comes out your nose, says the text, right? So it's one of those pretty direct, you wanted the calf, you got it.
So be careful what you wish for.
Careful what you wish for. Careful what you make. Careful what you attach, all your sense of what's important to, because that's what's going to fill you. For real. Literally.
So is the commentary here focused on the fact that the people were so loving of God they brought too much?
Yes. The business is that there was so much that it was overwhelming, right? The people were so generous and so into this project that Moshe had to say enough. That top one. Thank you. Huh? They took it from the Egyptians when they left. God made the Egyptians favorable towards the Israelites, that they would give them gifts of gold on their parting. So however you want to interpret that, in terms of mythically what happened, exactly. An offer they couldn't refuse to make. Right? They made an offer they couldn't refuse to make at that point. So we're handing out a packet.
3 pages? No. 3 pages?
Yes.
Three pages. I'm going to be looking at the top page of that packet with you in a minute. But first look at verse 1 of chapter 37. Because that's going to make this make sense. Verse 1, chapter 37. Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, and blah, 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 overlaid it with pure gold. He did everything he was supposed to about it. Then at so we see verse 10, he makes the table of acacia wood. 17, he makes the lampstand. Right, he makes the incense later. Then we're going to get him building the actual structure, right? So it's a very interesting little tiny thing that it says he starts with the ark. Okay, so that's where he chooses to start. Who cares? Well, if you go to Brachot, if you go to the Talmud, Brachot, the rabbis care. They care a lot about this. So let's go to the Talmud. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan. So in Jewish tradition, you never teach except in the name of the person who taught it to you. Or, the person who it's attributed to. If you don't know who it's attributed to, you teach it what we call B'Shem Omro, in the name of the person who said it. So I say, Lisa Simon once said to me, right? And I learned a lot from that. And I engage, right, the teachers. So you always attribute what you say, because most of what we come up with is not original. Most of what we have to say, we heard from somebody, and in our tradition, to do so, to say something without attributing it, is considered stealing.
Yes.
So always in Talmud, you will see Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, right? Because you have to attribute it. Amar Rabbi Yonatan. So it's attributed to Reb Shmuel, who says he learned it from Reb Yonatan. So we have 2 generations of teachers here, right? And so that's why you always see this. Even in your Haggadah, Rabbi so-and-so says, Rabbi so-and-so, right? Because you're always attributing your argument to the person who made it.
Even when you say a blessing over the Torah, you attribute who you are to your parents. You always announce the parent's name as well.
As part of our name. That's how we define ourselves. It's not the bracha, but it's our name. Okay, so Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said, right, that Rabbi Yonatan said, Bezalel al kol shem chochmato. So that Bezalel is called Bezalel because of his wisdom, right? That's why he's Nikra Bezalel. He's called Bezalel. B'sha'ah she'amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe. In the moment that God, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, in rabbinical school we called it the KBH. The KBH says to Moshe, go. Amar lo leBetzalel. Go and say to Betzalel, Asali Mishkan Aron Ukelim. God says to Moshe, go to Betzalel and say, make for me, meaning God, make for me what? Mishkan, Aron, Kelim. A Mishkan, an ark, and Kelim, utensils. Whatever. Halach Moshe. Moshe went. V'hafach. And flipped it around. Ve'amarlo, and said to him, meaning to Betzalel, Asa Aron v'kelim u'mishkan. With what we just read. Make an ark, utensils, and a mishkan. Why? And how could that be? And what does that mean? Oh my God, that's a problem, right? Amarlo Moshe Rabbeinu. And so Moshe... No, who says to who? Amarlo, Moshe Rabbeinu. So he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, our teacher, Min hagoshel olam, Adam bone bayit. It is the way of people for eternity in this world that you build bayit. You build a house. Ve'achar kach machnis l'tocho kelim. And afterwards, you bring into it vessels or furniture or, utensils. Ve'ata, but you, Omer, asali aron v'kelim u'mishkan. But you said to me, make me an ark and vessels and a mishkan. Shani Yoseh, right? That I should do. Lehechan achnis shemakach. Right? So, but if I don't have a place to bring them in, what does it make sense to make all these other things, right? Meaning, every architect knows you build a house first. You don't build the sofa first. So he respectfully asks Moshe, wait, so what could Moshe, just think about our day and age. What would we expect the response to be? Oh, come on.
What was the question?
The architect goes to Moshe and says, you told me, make an ark and vessels and a mishkan. But everybody knows you build the mishkan first, and then you make everything else. What could Moshe's response be? Well,
I think you are that important that we have to place you first. We have to build the ark first, as because we're the house of worship.
That is not what most people would say. I completely disagree. Do what I told you to do. Who's the prophet here? I'm the one who's up on a mountain talking to God. Just saying. Why don't you do your job? I'm doing mine. All right? I'm repeating to you what I got told. Why don't you just do what I tell you to do and build the flippin' mishkan, right? So, who are you to tell me, right? What, really? So, but what I love about this teaching is, what does it say? So instead, Moshe's answer is, Kach Amar Lecha Hakadosh Baruch Hu Asa Mishkan. Is it chopped off? Shema B'Tzel El. Here it is. Amar Lo. Moshe says to him, Shema, perhaps B'Tzel El Hayita V'Yadata. Perhaps in the shadow of God were you, and you knew. You understood. So what is Moshe's answer?
You must know. You must have.
Bezalel was right.
You're right.
Yeah, you're right.
Bezalel. Your name is Bezalel because obviously you are in the shadow of God and understood something that I didn't understand. I might have made a mistake, or you understand it differently because you truly dwell in the shadow of the divine. You have your own gifts and your own understanding, right? And this is not our typical answer to things. But in the Talmud, they make this not fight. They all we have is the make an ark, a thing, and the Mishkan. Like, stop, we're done, right? Let's move on to the next verse. Not the rabbis. They take this as a way for Bezalel to challenge Moshe to say, that makes no sense. So that they can have Moshe answer, perhaps you dwell within the shadow of God and therefore see things or understand things that I don't and I can't. I think it's remarkable as a teaching about what it means to truly be able to honor that other people see things or understand things really differently from us, and it doesn't make them wrong, and it doesn't make us wrong. Moshe doesn't say, oh, I misunderstood. He acknowledges that Bezalel understands something differently than he does.
Understands creativity.
Understands creativity. Huh? I'm sorry, creativity and what?
Honors.
And honors.
And honors it. And honors that that's not his gift.
And it makes Moshe more human, too.
And it makes him possibly fallible.
Yes.
I think it shows that leadership includes humility.
Right.
I think it's a really important point that the rabbis are trying to make over and over again, particularly in the context of Moshe, is that humility is what makes a leader great. It isn't necessarily even that he has access to God and can bring down God's word, right? That doesn't make him great. What makes him great is that even with that, he is humble. Even with direct access to the divine, he honors that somebody else has experience or knowledge or gifts that he doesn't have, and so can understand the word of God differently, which makes it just as right as I who heard it directly from the mouth of God. That to me is a brilliant piece of this piece of Talmud.
I was just going to say that all days for you to bring this up. Watching CNN is like watching a live sports event. there's something in here.
How do we send a copy of this?
I think that's why it struck me as so instructive, right? It's like, because it's so not how we respond these days, right? We just don't have the capacity right now to say, okay, I don't understand it that way. You clearly do. So let's talk about how do we get to a place where we can all agree on at least some basics, right? Like that everyone deserves health care. I don't know, something crazy like that. Like that children should be, there's no evidence that feeding children in school ups their performance. Okay, I'm going to try this. And I'm going to say, I'm not going to react, but I am going to ask the question. I get it that you need to see results before you fund something. Could we possibly get to a place where we agree that hungry children should be fed? Could we maybe get there? All right. So you've got this also, the second part of your packet.
It's also a good example of how community could possibly work together to come to a solution on an issue.
100%. 100%.
And as a leader, when you do something like this, it shows that you're a reasonable person. It makes you even better, a better person, when you can show that you can do something like this.
That you can say, okay, I didn't understand it that way, but clear, you're the artisan, you're the architect. Okay, got it. Let's do that. You know better than I how to get this done, right? All right.
I just wanted to say in the very beginning of all this business, what this gentleman was referring to just now, you said we have, I think you said, sort of quote, that we have got to find some way of finding some good in what's going on with the other side so that we can...
To find the common good.
Common good, okay. So the Democrats are getting together this Sunday, and the title of the program is What Can We Do? So I said to a very good friend of mine, well, we've got to find some way. So she said to me, you'll find some way. I don't think, and
I'm done, right? You find a way. I'm done with them.
Right, exactly.
It's where we are.
It's not going to be easy.
At all. At all. At all. So if you go to the teaching from Rabbi Rachel Goldenberg from the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, we get her lifting up, right? So that's why I brought it to your attention, because I'll teach B'Shem Omrah, and the name of the person who said it is Rachel Goldenberg, who says, right, notice kol, all, whole, right, that second paragraph of her teaching. All, it gets repeated over and over and over again. And then we get down to verses 13 and 18 of chapter 36. And they made 50 gold clasps and coupled the units to one another with the clasps so that the tabernacle became one whole. HaMishkan echad became one. Then verse 18 says the same thing again, right? And they made all this stuff, lechaber et ha'ohel liyot echad, in order to hold together the ohel, the tent, liyot echad, for it to be one. So in chapter 37, she tells us that we get all of these details of what they're supposed to create. The spirit, go to page 2. The spirit of this project seems to be about pulling the people together as a whole in order to build one unified space that itself visually communicates wholeness and oneness. Is it so hot in here?
No.
Okay. All right, no worries. The teaching is on fire. It's on fire.
But we all have, most of us in here have felt that kind of feeling from time to time.
Layering is your friend.
Yeah. Drop down to, but lest you think we're finished yet. So all of it's going to be a whole, right? But lest you think we're finished, we have 10 more verses. Again, listing all the parts and pieces of the structure as the Israelites bring them to Moshe. So we get all the descriptions of everything they're supposed to bring. Then so that the ohel can be echad. So it all can be echad. And that's where it should end, says this commentary, right? Duh. It's, in a good way. Ta-da! It's one. Except, then we get a bunch of verses about, and the people brought blue and crimson yarn, and the people brought lapis lazuli, and the people brought so, and now we get the whole list again as the people bring it. Why? Just in case you missed it.
As we saw in last week's.
Right? So she dropped down to that last paragraph on page 2. These, as the good doctor just suggested, these past few weeks, I imagine many of us have either been attending or watching video footage of town hall meetings that public officials are holding, right? So go to CNN, call it whatever place you want to that she's directing us to. At a certain point, all the way down the end of that paragraph, at a certain point, constituents begin to yell, "You work for us." I heard the same phrase, "You work for us," on a video of another town hall taking place in Texas. The Congress member had told a constituent who was pressing him to answer a question to shut up. Right? Completely antithetical to this brachot teaching that we just had. And so she says this is troubling, right, to see people trying to shut each other down. And she says it reassures her that citizens are not standing for that. Page 3, you should have a highlighted paragraph, yes? Did it highlight on the copier? No, it did not. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So I never know. This statement, "You work for us," is a reminder that we are all part of one whole American people and that our legislators are supposed to represent us as an extension of our body politic. We are all hammered out of the same gold that forms the cover with its kruvim on the ark or the branches with their cups and calyxes on the menorah. We are all pieces of fabric linked by the clasps of our representational form of government, and we are therefore accountable to each other. So this is where she's going. We're accountable to each other. Citizens don't feel whole in how we participate or feel that our contributions or anything counts until we've heard the report and seen the accounting from our representatives. Our democracy only serves us when those elected officials are transparent about their intentions, their stances on the issues we care about. They are but an extension of this larger us. So what is she arguing that whole next list is for?
The audit.
The audit.
It's for the boring people like me that have done it my whole life, where somebody wants to say, where did the money go? You just raised
We brought all this stuff. You said we needed to bring all this stuff.
And there's the person that wants the accounting.
They want the audit. They want the accounting because that's what makes it transparent. Because then we know that it's being accounted for properly.
That's why KI sends it out once a year, and most people throw it away, and a handful of people look at it.
And some of y'all pour over the details.
I feel better now. I know somebody looked at it.
And that's why we have accountants.
And that's why we have audits.
Do that.
That's why we have audits, right? Because it's your money.
Right.
It's your synagogue. It should be completely transparent.
This is probably the most important. I do some teaching, and I've done in the medical school. And one of the things that you try to teach the junior people as they're going up and they're moving up is that leadership does not, from the top down, but leadership works, successful leadership works for the individuals who are, you're supposed to be leading. Sometimes it feels like you're herding cats or whatever. But the bottom line is, you have many, as a leader, you have many mouths to feed, as opposed to the top-down sort of concept that we have in today's government, where I'm the leader and I'm telling you what you're going to have and it's going to be wonderful. It's a critically important point about leadership that all too few people get, that it's not top-down.
Right. Or top... That top doesn't mean the power to then control what happens down, right? That it's a responsibility down. The top down is responsibility for, and is a very important point. So let's go to this other paragraph. The Israelites could have decided to simply bring their contributions to the building of the Mishkan and to trust that it would be used appropriately. Given that this was holy work, they might have made that assumption. However, it seems that someone spoke up and asked for an audit. Or that Moses felt an inner motivation to do so. The Torah is therefore teaching us that for our pursuits to truly serve God or to serve a greater purpose, we need to be transparent in our dealings with each other. So it's partly about the building project and about making sure everything's accounted for. The other thing she's suggesting, I think, is it's about our relationships to each other. If you're not transparent with what you're responsible for, right, then it clouds the relationship. There's a blockage in the artery. Stuff is not going to flow between us if I can't trust that you're accountable, that you get it, that you're accountable to me, that you feel like you should be, that I feel like I can ask for that, and vice versa, right? And that there's a blockage placed in the relationship between people if we're not accountable to each other. If I say, I get to vote how I want as a senator, or I get to vote however I want, and I don't need to listen to my constituents. Right? We are accountable to each other.
And also, there's a sense that Bezalel couldn't use this stuff for his own purposes.
100%.
That everything that everybody brought, they're bringing their gold, and they're bringing their stones, and they're bringing everything.
And this is what he made out of it.
That they need to know that wasn't used. He didn't just take it and go to Las Vegas.
Absolutely right. In this spirit, I'll close with this. I just think this is beautiful. In this spirit, the commentator N. Block comments on the verse about how the ephod, which represents the priest's accountability to God, and the breastpiece, which represents the priest's accountability to the people, cannot come loose from each other. Another detail of one of these lists, and the ephod shall be attached to the breastpiece that we read right over, that our tradition continues to unpack as a living tradition. It unpacks it and says what that means is not just they have to be hooked together. It means they should never be separate. His responsibility as priest, his accountability to God, and his accountability to the people, that they are interwoven. He cannot serve God without serving the people. And if he's only serving the people, to be powerful, to be the chief, to be whatever, that's not going to work. He has to be serving the people in order to be accountable to God. That's the whole idea of this Mishkan project, is about us, taking, and the priests taking their responsibility for serving the people, and the people helping to serve the priests. Like with every sacrifice they bring, they feed the priests. We're serving each other. We hold each other accountable so that we can all be in relationship, right? In right relationship to that which is greater than all of us, which this whole project, humanity, the whole project of life on this planet is about. If you ask some of us, what are we here for? What's the meaning? To be accountable to each other so that we can serve and pull through our service to each other that which is greater than all of us.
And release your taxes.
And be ready to release your taxes.
Sitting here and my head is spinning off. And I must make a pitch for the Older Americans Act funding. This is talking about funding Meals on Wheels and funding legal services for the poor, the funding case management, the funding congregate meals, all of those safety net services that since the Great Society in 1964 have been in place, and it's now on the
chopping block
national agenda that these services are useless. And so when you talk about feeding the children, I'm talking about feeding elderly people who would
starve,
and other services. So I put that out on the table, and when articles come out, it's not about Social Security, it's not about Medicare, it's not about Medicaid, it's about other services that are now on the national agenda to get rid of.
Thank you. Pam?
I wanted to go back to just when everybody's bringing their gifts. Some people are bringing gold, and some people are bringing silver and copper and fabrics and their abilities as crafts people. And I think there's a big metaphor in there for, that maybe we feel unless we have gold, copper, I'm really going to bring copper. But in the building of the Mishkan, yes, the ark was covered in gold, but then the silver sockets, created a space for the Mishkan, and the labor out of copper. We couldn't have a Mishkan without these different materials, and we could not have it. So that I think in our own maybe we think, oh, we're elderly and what can we do? Or we don't have the money. We have gifts that we each need to give, whatever that is, to build our Mishkan right here at Kehillat Israel. Yeah.
Amen, sister. Amen. We'll close with the words of the poet Ruth Bryn. They build the tabernacle, Vayakhel. To devotion, God set no limits. And to dedication of the Spirit, God set no bounds. But great quantities of tribute God did not demand. And the people were restrained from bringing too much gold for the tabernacle. Though the temples of Solomon and Herod were far more costly, it is written that the divine presence was found more constantly in the humbler structure. To dedicate the Spirit to God is more difficult than to give money. To devote the whole heart to the Lord is more difficult than bringing gifts. Not because of the gold on the walls does the light of the sanctuary shine forth, but because of the Spirit within. Those who worship carry away with them more than they bring, for they find there the light to illumine their lives. So may it be when we study, when we pray, may we take more than we bring. May it illumine this study and every study, illumine our lives. Shabbat Shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.